Uncovering humanity's darkest hour. The liberation of Auschwitz. The liberation of Auschwitz and other concentration camps in 1945 marked a crucial and harrowing chapter in the final stages of the Second World War. These events not only revealed the extent of the Nazi regime's crimes but also underscored the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable suffering. Auschwitz, the largest and most notorious of the Nazi concentration and extermination camps, became a central symbol of the Holocaust. Its liberation by Soviet forces, along with that of other camps, brought to light the full horrors of Nazi atrocities and prompted a global reckoning with the consequences of hate and genocide. Auschwitz was established in 1940 in occupied Poland, initially as a concentration camp for Polish political prisoners. Over time, it evolved into a complex of camps, including Auschwitz I, the administrative center, Auschwitz II-Birkenau, the extermination site, and Auschwitz III Monowitz, a labor camp. By 1942, Auschwitz became the epicenter of the Nazis' final solution, the systematic effort to annihilate the Jewish population of Europe. Gas chambers, crematoria, and barracks were constructed to facilitate mass murder on an industrial scale. The camp's victims included Jews, Romani people, Soviet prisoners of war, political dissidents, and other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. Over 1.1 million people, most of them Jews, were murdered at Auschwitz. The camp also became infamous for inhumane medical experiments conducted by Nazi doctors, including Joseph Mengele. As the Soviet Red Army advanced westward in early 1945, Nazi forces began evacuating Auschwitz and other camps in an attempt to conceal evidence of their crimes. Tens of thousands of prisoners were forced on death marches toward Germany, resulting in the deaths of thousands from exhaustion, exposure, and brutality. Those unable to march were left behind in the camps, often in dire conditions. On January 27, 1945, Soviet troops liberated Auschwitz. They encountered scenes of unspeakable horror: emaciated survivors, piles of corpses, and warehouses filled with stolen belongings, including human hair, glasses, and shoes. These artifacts bore silent witness to the scale of the atrocities committed. The liberation of Auschwitz brought the Holocaust into stark focus for the world, galvanizing efforts to document the crimes and seek justice for the victims. Other concentration camps were also liberated in 1945, each revealing similar horrors. In April, American forces liberated Buchenwald and Dachau, while British forces reached Bergen-Belsen. These camps, like Auschwitz, were sites of immense suffering and death. Survivors recounted stories of brutality, starvation, and loss, and the liberators faced the daunting task of providing immediate care to those who had endured years of inhumane treatment. The liberation of the camps had profound implications for the post-war world. It provided undeniable evidence of Nazi crimes, shaping the trials of war criminals at Nuremberg and other tribunals. The testimonies of survivors, along with the physical evidence found in the camps, underscored the need for international legal standards to prevent and punish genocide. The legacy of the Holocaust, epitomized by the liberation of Auschwitz and other camps, continues to resonate today. It serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of hatred, bigotry, and indifference. Memorials and museums around the world commemorate the victims and educate future generations about the importance of vigilance against prejudice and the defense of human rights. The liberation of Auschwitz and other camps in 1945 stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and the imperative to confront and learn from history's darkest chapters. It is a reminder that even in the face of profound suffering, the courage to bear witness and seek justice endures. The price of tyranny. The death of Benito Mussolini. The death of Benito Mussolini on April 28, 1945, marked the conclusion of a brutal chapter in Italian history. As the leader of fascist Italy and an architect of its alliance with Nazi Germany, Mussolini's demise represented both the collapse of fascism and the culmination of years of resistance and suffering during the Second World War. His death, occurring during the final days of the war in Europe, not only signaled the end of an era for Italy but also served as a symbol of accountability for authoritarian regimes. By the spring of 1945, the Axis powers in Europe were on the brink of defeat. Germany faced relentless pressure from advancing Allied forces, and Italy, liberated by the Allies in 1943, was divided into a war-torn north controlled by the puppet Italian Social Republic, the RSI, and a south aligned with the Allies. Mussolini, having been deposed in 1943 and reinstated by Hitler to lead the RSI, was effectively a figurehead presiding over a collapsing regime. His government was plagued by resistance movements and desertions, with even his staunch supporters losing faith in fascism's future. As the Allied advance into northern Italy accelerated, Mussolini attempted to escape the inevitable collapse. On April 25, 1945, the National Liberation Committee of Northern Italy, the CLNAI, called for a general insurrection, prompting widespread uprisings in cities such as Milan, Genoa, and Turin. Mussolini fled Milan with a group of loyal fascists, intending to reach Switzerland or Germany. Disguised in a German military uniform, he joined a convoy of retreating German soldiers, hoping to evade capture. However, Mussolini's plan unraveled on April 27, when his convoy was stopped near the village of Dongo by Italian partisans of the 52nd Garibaldi Brigade. Recognized and detained, Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacci, were held overnight. The following day, they were executed by partisans under orders from the CLNAI. While the precise details of the execution remain debated, Mussolini and Petacci were shot near the village of Gelino di Mezzagra. Their bodies were then transported to Milan and publicly displayed in Piazzale Loreto, where they were hung upside down for public view. The decision to display Mussolini's body was laden with symbolism. Piazzale Loreto had been the site of a Nazi massacre in 1944, where 15 Italian partisans were executed and their bodies left on display as a warning. By exhibiting Mussolini and Petacci's corpses in the same location, the partisans sought to deliver a message of justice and retribution. Crowds gathered to witness the spectacle, with many expressing their anger and frustration at Mussolini's regime by desecrating the bodies. Mussolini's death had immediate and far-reaching consequences for Italy and the broader geopolitical landscape. Domestically, it signified the definitive end of fascism as a political force in Italy. While remnants of the RSI continued to resist for a few days, Mussolini's demise deprived them of leadership and legitimacy. The liberation of northern Italy, coupled with Mussolini's execution, paved the way for the establishment of the Italian Republic in 1946. Internationally, Mussolini's death was emblematic of the collapse of authoritarian regimes in Europe. With Hitler's suicide following 2 days later on April 30, 1945, the Axis powers were effectively dismantled, bringing the European theatre of the Second World War to a close. The deaths of Mussolini and Hitler also underscored the personal and political costs of totalitarianism, serving as a stark warning against the dangers of unchecked power and ideological extremism. The legacy of Mussolini's death remains complex and contentious. For many Italians, his execution was a necessary act of justice for the atrocities committed under fascist rule, including aggressive wars, political repression, and collaboration with Nazi Germany. However, debates persist about the legality and morality of his execution without trial. Some argue that a formal trial would have provided a clearer historical record and a stronger foundation for post-war justice. Mussolini's life and death continue to provoke discussions about the nature of fascism, the dynamics of power, and the responsibilities of leadership. His rise to power in the 1920s, marked by charismatic rhetoric and authoritarian policies, offers lessons about the vulnerabilities of democratic institutions. Similarly, his downfall and violent end highlight the inherent instability and ultimate fragility of regimes built on oppression and aggression. The public display of Mussolini's body in Piazzale Loreto remains one of the most iconic images of the Second World War's conclusion. It symbolizes not only the end of fascism in Italy but also the profound societal and political transformations that emerged from the war. For Italy, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in which the nation sought to rebuild its identity, reconcile its past, and chart a democratic future. The story of Mussolini's death, like the broader history of fascism, serves as a reminder of the complexities and consequences of political leadership and ideology. Death of a dictator. The final days of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. The death of Adolf Hitler on April 30, 1945, in his Führerbunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, marked the definitive end of Nazi leadership and signified the collapse of the Third Reich. This event occurred as the Allies advanced on all fronts, with Soviet forces encircling Berlin, and the Western Allies pressing into Germany. Hitler's demise and the circumstances surrounding it remain a subject of historical and symbolic importance, encapsulating the downfall of one of history's most infamous dictators. As April 1945 began, Berlin was under siege. Soviet forces, led by Marshal Georgy Zhukov, launched their final offensive on the German capital. The relentless artillery bombardment and urban combat devastated the city. Within the Führer bunker, Hitler and his inner circle faced the inevitable defeat. Despite the hopelessness of the situation, Hitler refused to flee Berlin, asserting his intention to die in the capital of his crumbling Reich. Hitler's bunker became the center of the collapsing Nazi government. His closest associates, including Joseph Goebbels, Martin Bormann, and Eva Braun, joined him there. While Hitler oscillated between delusional plans for counterattacks and despair over his impending defeat, his subordinates prepared for the end. On April 29, Hitler dictated his last will and political testament, blaming the war's outcome on international Jewry, and the failures of his generals. He named Admiral Karl Dönitz as his successor as president and Joseph Goebbels as chancellor, solidifying the end of Nazi Germany's centralized leadership. On April 30, with Soviet troops closing in on the Reich Chancellery, Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide. Hitler shot himself, while Braun took cyanide. Their bodies were burned in the garden above the bunker to prevent them from becoming trophies for the advancing Soviet forces. Witnesses, including Hitler's personal staff, later provided detailed accounts of these events during Allied interrogations and war crimes trials. The discovery of Hitler's remains by Soviet forces led to widespread speculation and misinformation. Stalin initially withheld confirmation of Hitler's death, fueling conspiracy theories about his possible escape. Soviet authorities later revealed that Hitler's charred remains had been buried in multiple locations before being finally destroyed in 1970 to prevent his grave from becoming a shrine for neo-Nazis. The impact of Hitler's death reverberated throughout Germany and beyond. Within days, Goebbels and his family committed suicide, and Dönitz attempted to negotiate a surrender to the Western Allies while continuing to fight the Soviets. On May 7, 1945, Germany's unconditional surrender brought the European theater of the Second World War to an end. Hitler's death represented more than the conclusion of his life. It marked the fall of the Nazi regime and the beginning of a reckoning with its crimes. In the years that followed, the atrocities committed under Hitler's leadership, including the Holocaust, aggressive wars, and widespread repression, were brought to light through investigations, trials, and historical scholarship. The Nuremberg trials held Nazi leaders accountable for crimes against humanity, setting a precedent for international law and justice. The Führer bunker itself became a symbol of Nazi Germany's catastrophic failure. After the war, the bunker was partially demolished, and the site was left unmarked, to discourage neo-Nazi pilgrimage. In the decades since, historians and the public have continued to grapple with the legacy of Hitler's rule, seeking to understand how one man and his ideology could lead a nation into war and genocide. Hitler's death also highlighted the fragility of totalitarian regimes reliant on centralized power and personality cults. With his demise, the Nazi state disintegrated, demonstrating the unsustainable nature of governance through fear, propaganda, and oppression. This collapse underscored the resilience of democratic institutions and the need for vigilance against authoritarianism. The Potsdam Conference. Shaping the post-war world. The Potsdam Conference, held from July 17 to August 2, 1945, was the last major meeting of the Allied leaders during the Second World War. Taking place in the Berlin suburb of Potsdam, this conference brought together Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union, Harry S. Truman of the United States, and Winston Churchill, later replaced by Clement Attlee, of the United Kingdom. As the Allies approached the conclusion of the war in Europe and the Pacific, the conference sought to address the complex challenges of post-war reconstruction, the fate of Germany, and the emerging global order. The setting of the Potsdam Conference underscored the gravity of the discussions. The war in Europe had ended just 2 months earlier with Germany's unconditional surrender, leaving a continent devastated by years of conflict. The Allied leaders faced the monumental task of rebuilding shattered nations, managing millions of displaced persons, and ensuring that Germany would never again become a threat to peace. One of the primary objectives of the conference was to agree on the administration of Germany. The Allies divided the country into 4 occupation zones, each controlled by one of the major Allied powers, the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and France. Berlin, the German capital, was similarly divided despite its location deep within the Soviet zone. The leaders reaffirmed their commitment to demilitarizing, denazifying, and democratizing Germany. However, tensions between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies regarding reparations and the political future of Germany began to surface. The conference also addressed territorial changes in Europe. The Allies finalized the Oder-Neisse line as the boundary between Germany and Poland, resulting in significant territorial losses for Germany. Poland's western border was shifted westward, compensating for its territorial losses to the Soviet Union in the east. These decisions displaced millions of Germans, Poles, and other ethnic groups, creating a humanitarian crisis that would linger for years. A key focus of the Potsdam Conference was the fate of Japan. With the war in the Pacific still raging, the Allies issued the Potsdam Declaration on July 26, calling for Japan's unconditional surrender. The declaration outlined terms for Japan's surrender, including disarmament, occupation, and the establishment of a democratic government. It also warned of prompt and utter destruction if Japan refused to comply. At the time, the Allies were preparing to use the atomic bomb, a fact known only to a select few. Truman, newly sworn in as US President after Franklin D. Roosevelt's death, informed Stalin about the existence of a powerful new weapon, though he did not elaborate. This revelation added to the growing unease between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Potsdam Conference highlighted the ideological and geopolitical differences among the Allies. Stalin sought to secure the Soviet Union's western borders and establish a sphere of influence in Eastern Europe to ensure Soviet security. The Western Allies, particularly the United States, advocated for self-determination and democratic governance in liberated nations. These conflicting visions foreshadowed the divisions that would soon lead to the Cold War. The atmosphere of the conference was further strained by changes in leadership. Truman, relatively inexperienced in international diplomacy, replaced Roosevelt, while Attlee took over from Churchill midway through the conference after a British general election. These transitions altered the dynamics of the negotiations, as both new leaders brought fresh perspectives and priorities to the table. Despite the tensions and disagreements, the Potsdam Conference achieved some important agreements. The Allies established the Allied Control Council to oversee the administration of Germany and set principles for its governance. They also reaffirmed the decisions made at the earlier Yalta Conference, including the prosecution of war criminals, and the establishment of the United Nations. The Potsdam Conference marked the end of the wartime alliance among the Allies and the beginning of a new era of international relations. The fragile unity that had sustained the coalition during the war began to unravel as ideological differences became more pronounced. The Soviet Union's actions in Eastern Europe, including the establishment of communist regimes in Poland and other countries, alarmed the Western Allies and set the stage for the division of Europe into rival blocs. The legacy of the Potsdam Conference is complex. It demonstrated the difficulty of balancing the interests of victorious powers while addressing the immense challenges of post-war reconstruction and global governance. The conference's decisions shaped the geopolitical landscape of the second half of the 20th century, influencing the development of the Cold War, the reconstruction of Europe, and the global struggle for decolonization and self-determination. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The dawn of the nuclear era. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 represent a transformative moment in modern history. These two events, marked by unprecedented destruction, not only hastened the end of the Second World War but also introduced a profound shift in global warfare and geopolitics. The bombings were the culmination of years of scientific innovation, military strategy, and political decision-making, leaving an enduring legacy that continues to shape international relations and humanity's relationship with nuclear weapons. The Manhattan Project, a secretive and ambitious initiative by the United States, laid the foundation for the bombings. With the collaboration of leading scientists, engineers, and military personnel, the project developed the world's first nuclear weapons. The fear that Nazi Germany might achieve similar capabilities spurred the program's urgency. By the time Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Manhattan Project had produced 2 atomic bombs, codenamed Little Boy and Fat Man. The decision to use atomic bombs against Japan arose in the context of a brutal and protracted conflict in the Pacific Theater. Despite devastating losses, Japan resisted surrender, and Allied military planners anticipated a costly invasion of the Japanese mainland. The Battle of Okinawa, which resulted in immense casualties for both sides, reinforced the perception that Japan's leadership would not capitulate easily. President Harry S. Truman, facing these grim realities, authorized the use of atomic weapons to compel Japan's surrender and minimize further Allied losses. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima, a city of military and industrial significance. The bomb exploded with an estimated force equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT, instantly killing tens of thousands of people and devastating much of the city. The unprecedented destruction and loss of life stunned the world. Hiroshima's population faced unimaginable suffering, with survivors enduring severe burns, radiation sickness, and long-term health consequences. Despite the devastation in Hiroshima, Japan's leadership did not immediately surrender. On August 9, the United States dropped Fat Man on Nagasaki, another key military and industrial hub. Although Nagasaki's hilly terrain limited the bomb's impact compared to Hiroshima, the explosion killed tens of thousands and left the city in ruins. The dual bombings demonstrated the destructive power of nuclear weapons and underscored the futility of further resistance. The atomic bombings, coupled with the Soviet Union's entry into the war against Japan on August 8, compelled Japan's surrender. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's acceptance of the Allies' terms, bringing the Second World War to a close. The bombings played a pivotal role in achieving this outcome, but they also sparked intense debate over their necessity and morality. The immediate aftermath of the bombings revealed the profound human cost of nuclear warfare. Survivors, known as hibakusha, faced long-term health challenges, including radiation-induced cancers and genetic mutations. The physical and psychological scars left by the bombings became a central theme in post-war Japanese society, influencing its pacifist constitution and cultural identity. The bombings also marked the beginning of the nuclear age, fundamentally altering international relations and military strategy. The United States' use of atomic weapons demonstrated its unparalleled military capability, establishing it as a global superpower. At the same time, the bombings ignited a nuclear arms race, as other nations sought to develop their own nuclear arsenals. The Cold War that followed was characterized by the pervasive threat of nuclear annihilation, shaping diplomatic efforts to prevent such a catastrophe. The legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is multifaceted and complex. For many, the bombings symbolize the horrors of war and the moral dilemmas posed by weapons of mass destruction. Memorials and museums in both cities serve as reminders of the need for peace and disarmament, drawing millions of visitors annually. The hibakusha have become powerful advocates for nuclear non-proliferation, sharing their experiences to warn against the dangers of nuclear war. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki stand as a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for both innovation and destruction. They underscore the importance of ethical considerations in technological advancement and highlight the enduring need for dialogue, understanding, and cooperation in preventing future conflicts. As the world continues to grapple with the implications of nuclear weapons, the lessons of 1945 remain as relevant as ever. The Scars of War. The Legacy of Two World Wars. The two world wars of the 20th century profoundly shaped the modern world, leaving an indelible mark on geopolitics, societies, economies, and cultures. The First World War, 1914 to 1918, and the Second World War, 1939 to 1945, though separated by 2 decades, were interconnected in their causes and consequences. Together, they represent the most destructive conflicts in human history, with far-reaching legacies that continue to influence global affairs and individual lives. The First World War, often referred to as the Great War, began as a result of complex alliances, militarism, nationalism, and imperial ambitions. It introduced industrial-scale warfare, with technologies like machine guns, tanks, poison gas, and airplanes transforming the nature of conflict. The war caused immense human suffering, claiming the lives of over 16 million soldiers and civilians. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended the war, imposed harsh penalties on Germany, sowing seeds of resentment and economic hardship that would later contribute to the Second World War. The legacy of the First World War is multifaceted. Politically, it led to the redrawing of national borders and the collapse of empires, including the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, German, and Russian empires. New nations emerged in Europe and the Middle East, but the arbitrary boundaries drawn by victorious powers often disregarded ethnic and cultural realities, leading to future conflicts. The League of Nations was established as an early attempt at international cooperation, but its failure to prevent aggression revealed the limitations of collective security without strong enforcement mechanisms. Socially and culturally, the First World War marked a turning point in attitudes toward war and authority. The disillusionment of the lost generation was reflected in art, literature, and philosophy, as writers like Erich Maria Remarque and poets like Wilfred Owen captured the horrors of the trenches. The war also accelerated social changes, including women's increased participation in the workforce, and their subsequent demands for greater rights, exemplified by suffrage movements. Economically, the war left Europe in financial ruin, with nations burdened by debt and inflation. The United States emerged as a major economic power, a shift that would have significant implications for the global order. However, the economic instability of the interwar years, exacerbated by the Great Depression, created conditions ripe for the rise of totalitarian regimes. The Second World War, often seen as a continuation of unresolved issues from the First World War, was even more devastating. With over 70 million deaths, it was the deadliest conflict in history. Unlike the First World War, which was largely confined to Europe, the Second World War was truly global, involving theaters in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. It was marked by unparalleled atrocities, including the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews and millions of others were systematically murdered by the Nazi regime. The Second World War's legacy is equally profound. Politically, it resulted in the emergence of the United States and the Soviet Union as superpowers, ushering in the Cold War era. The ideological battle between capitalism and communism shaped global politics for decades, influencing conflicts, alliances, and revolutions worldwide. The establishment of the United Nations in 1945 represented a renewed effort to promote peace and prevent future wars, incorporating lessons from the League of Nations' failure. The war also accelerated decolonization, as European powers weakened by the conflict faced increasing demands for independence from colonies in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. Figures like Mahatma Gandhi, Kwame Nkrumah, and Ho Chi Minh led movements that reshaped the global landscape, challenging imperial structures and fostering new national identities. Economically, the Second World War catalyzed industrial growth and technological innovation, particularly in the United States, which emerged as the world's leading economic power. Reconstruction efforts, such as the Marshall Plan, facilitated Europe's recovery and laid the foundation for economic integration, eventually leading to the formation of the European Union. Japan, too, transformed into an economic powerhouse through post-war reforms and investment. Culturally, the war left a deep imprint on collective memory and identity. The Holocaust, Hiroshima, and the resistance movements became powerful symbols of human suffering, resilience, and the need for vigilance against tyranny. The war also influenced popular culture, inspiring countless books, films, and art that continue to shape perceptions of the conflict and its heroes. The technological legacy of the Second World War is significant. Advances in aviation, radar, and rocketry, driven by wartime needs, laid the groundwork for the space race and the development of modern electronics. However, the most consequential technological development was the atomic bomb, which not only ended the war but also introduced the threat of nuclear annihilation, shaping international relations and military strategy during the Cold War and beyond. The legacy of both world wars is also evident in their impact on human rights and international law. The atrocities of the Second World War, particularly the Holocaust, spurred the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and the establishment of the International Criminal Court. These developments represented a commitment to preventing genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, though their implementation remains a work in progress. Despite their immense costs, the two world wars also fostered a renewed commitment to peace and international cooperation. Organizations like NATO, the European Union, and the United Nations emerged as mechanisms to prevent conflict and promote stability. Yet, the lessons of the wars are continually tested by new challenges, from regional conflicts to global crises like climate change and pandemics. The legacy of the two world wars is a complex tapestry of tragedy and transformation. They reshaped borders, ideologies, and societies, leaving an enduring impact on global politics and culture. While they exposed the darkest capacities of human nature, they also inspired movements for justice, cooperation, and progress. Understanding their legacy is essential not only for honoring the sacrifices of those who lived through them but also for navigating the challenges of our interconnected world. This is the final chapter of the Second World War series. In future series, we will cover the Cold War era, including the Vietnam War, and the space race. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.